Hey, welcome to another Flarecorp Media photography tutorial thing. I'm Jason, and today I'm going to show you how to use a gimbal to do a motion time-lapse of the Milky Way as it goes across the sky, giving the illusion that the Earth is spinning underneath it. It's a pretty cool illusion, but it can be a little tricky to get set up, so I'm going to show you how to do that. I have with me my Ronin-SC gimbal with a Fuji X-T3 camera. But if your gimbal and camera have the ability to do a motion time-lapse, then those will work just fine. And because this tutorial is going to be pretty long, I'm going to divide it up into two different videos. The first one that you're watching today is going to show you two different things. First, how to set up your camera to take a beautiful picture of the Milky Way, and second, how to set up your gimbal so you can follow the path of the Milky Way as it travels across the sky, creating that awesome time-lapse. I'm going to have timestamps down in the video description below, as well as over on my blog, flarecorpmedia.com. There is a blog post specifically for this tutorial. And there I'll have the steps laid out a little more clearly, as well as have some tips and tricks that I encounter all grouped together instead of spread out throughout the whole video. The second part of the tutorial is going to be another video coming out tomorrow. And in that, I'm going to show you how to take all of those photos and process them into the motion time-lapse. Once that video is out tomorrow, I'll have it linked in the description below, as well as at the end of this video. I've done these time lapses several different times, and the most recent time I went down to a lake in southern Nebraska where it was a little bit darker. The scenery was nothing special, but it was nice and dark. And I recorded the time lapse that we're going to use in this tutorial in the second half when I show you how to edit it on the computer. And this is actually the fourth time that I've recorded the explanation of how to take the time lapse, because the first time I recorded it on location, but it was at night with night vision, and I was kind of scatterbrained because there are lots of bugs, and I was being harassed by a dog that looked just like a coyote that was trying to climb in my car. Hey, no. And so it was kind of hard to follow. Second time, one of my cameras had overheating issues. The third time, had a firmware issue with my gimbal. And so here we are on the fourth try. So fourth try's the charm. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into how to set up your camera, set up your gimbal to do the time lapse. I am going to be cutting in some of the footage from the lake so you can see exactly how I set things up on location, but in here in the studio, it'll probably be easier to see some of it as well. So to put yourself in the right mindset, imagine this gimbal is sitting on top of a tripod out in nature. Obviously you won't be using this little tripod, you'd put it on a proper one. You want to try to use your most sturdy tripod you have, because if it's wiggling, then this whole thing's going to wiggle and it could make your pictures not be quite as sharp. The first thing we're going to work on is getting our camera set up to take a nice picture of the Milky Way. Now when you're doing astrophotography of the Milky Way, you want to try to use your shortest focal length, widest field of view lens. This is the Fuji 16mm f2.8 lens. It's a great lens for taking wide shots at night. And the thing you want to do first is make sure that you don't have any filters on your lens. This is just a UV filter, but you want to take that off too, because for two reasons. One, if you have filters, UV is not quite as bad, but if you have filters, it can make your image darker. And we want to be able to gather as much light as we can of those stars, because we're going to do a long exposure for 12 to 18 seconds. And if this is blocking some of the light, we won't get as much in, and we won't see quite as many nuances in that galaxy. The second reason to take it off is the fact that sometimes bright lights, like if there's a bright light on the ground or a bright planet like Jupiter and Saturn are out there crossing the Milky Way right now, or the moon, you can get reflections. The light will come in, bounce off of your lens, come back out, hit your filter, and then bounce back in. So to avoid that, let's just get rid of it. You can leave your hood back on though, no problem with that. The next thing you need to do is figure out what settings on your camera you need in order to get a good picture of the Milky Way. Really, this is just trial and error. You just take some practice shots and tweak some things and wait until you get a good picture, and those are going to be your settings. But I can kind of give you a little guide here for this Fuji X-T3 with the 16mm lens. I use a 15-second exposure at my widest aperture, f2.8, with the ISO somewhere between 3200 and 6400, depending on how much moonlight there is, or if there's lights coming up from the horizon. kind of adjusted around there. I wouldn't go any higher than 6400 because you're going to start introducing a lot of noise and grain, and that's going to make your picture not look quite as pretty because you're going to have stars sprinkled all over the place, but then there's going to be all this grain in there as well. And in order to get rid of that, you'd have to do a smoothing in post-processing, but that'll smooth out some of your stars and lose some of the details. So try to keep your ISO under 6400, and if you have an older camera, maybe even under like 5000, because older cameras tend to be a little bit noisier than the newer ones. The final thing we need to check is our focus. We are going to have to use manual focus, and that can be kind of hard to get the focus dialed in looking at just stars. So if you get the chance to get out to the location while the sun is still up, like, you know, sunset, sun's going down, focus on something close enough to infinity, you know, like 30 meters away, a tree or something, and dial in your focus and leave it. If you get out there and the sun's already set and you need to focus on something, you can try using the moon, but you're going to have to turn your exposure settings way down because the moon is so bright. Or you can try shining a flashlight or something on trees more than 30 meters away to get that focus in. And you can't just spin it all the way to what you consider infinity, because most camera lenses can actually go past infinity. And so like this one, I can go to infinity and I need to dial it just a scotch back to lock in my focus. So again, trial and error, but once you get it figured out, it's pretty easy to get out there and get sharp focus really fast. So now let's jump out to the lake and I'll show you how I dialed in those settings on location. So now, before it gets dark, we're going to take a moment to check our focus if we can. So we're going to find something off in the distance. So we'll make sure that we are in manual mode and that I'm in single shot mode. There's so many bugs out here. I forgot my bug spray. See, it's dark, so that means we need to up our settings. We're going to up our, for now, just for focusing, we're going to up our shutter speed to bulb just so we can see stuff. We're going to up the ISO way up too. Again, just so we can see stuff. I'm also going to set my aperture to its widest. And this lens goes to f2.8. So now I'm going to make sure I'm in manual focus, which I am, MF. Now you can come and turn on to help you. Come and turn on manual focus assistant. So I have it on peak, so that's going to show an edge when something is in focus. And then I'm also going to turn on focus check, which is going to zoom in on the center of the screen so I can kind of dial my focus in better. You can do this with just the stars, but it's easier if you can do it in the light and then just not touch it. You can actually see this is great because it tells you where you are and it's pretty accurate. So I usually end up going there right on the edge with one blue line on that side, and that's always been good for me. A couple of tips if you're having trouble dialing in your exposure time is the shorter your focal length, the longer you're going to be able to take a picture usually. And so you should be able to go anywhere, like I said, between 12 and 18, maybe 20 seconds if you have like a 10mm lens or something. But you definitely don't want to have any star trails. So when you take your picture and look at it, make sure that those stars are pinpoints. If they're, you know, even streaked just a little bit, it's going to ruin the effect of the time lapse. So you dial your exposure back. But you also want to make sure it's as long as possible, because that's going to bring out the nuances of the Milky Way, because there's shadows, there's dust in there, there's light. In post-processing, it gives you the ability to bring out some of those cool details. One more thing regarding camera settings is you want to pick a white balance. Don't leave it on auto. It doesn't really matter what you pick, but the whole point of picking a white balance is so that way it's not changing over the course of the 3 hours and the motion and the color of the sky. So if you leave it on auto, it's going to adjust it, and that's going to make processing it harder in the end. Yeah, if you're using the raw files, you can go back and change the white balance to whatever you want, but it's just a lot easier to visualize and edit if you pick one. So I usually just pick daylight and leave it for that for all the shots, and then I can come back and I know that every single shot has the same white balance when I start color tweaking. Another tip is that if your camera or your lens has image stabilization, you want to make sure you turn that off. So that'd be optical image stabilization, in-body image stabilization, IBIS, or even digital image stabilization. And that may seem counterintuitive because you may think, well, if I have image stabilization on, then it'll help kind of adjust for the Earth moving and the stars moving and help keep them sharper. But it's actually the opposite. Let me show you what I mean. So let's pretend this is our sensor and that star is right in the middle of our sensor. But because the image stabilization has been processing all the time, right now it's actually down here. Now, in order to keep that star in alignment, if the star was moving this way, the sensor would need to move this way, but it can't because it's already possibly at the end of its motion, and so it's going to have to say, well, now I need to adjust that back, so I'm going to jump all the way over here and then start tracking that star again, keeping it centered. And so that actually ends up causing more jumps and blurring than if you didn't have it on at all. And believe me, I spent about an hour one night learning this the hard way, trying to figure out why my stars were blurry when I was doing a rock solid shot before learning I had to turn off image stabilization. Now that we've got our camera settings all dialed in, we need to figure out where in the sky the Milky Way is going to be so we can set up the route that our time lapse is going to follow. Now in the northern hemisphere, the Milky Way always rises in the south, and the best time to see it is in the summer. It's going to be rising from about 11 p.m. to, well, at least 4 a.m. is going to be the prime spot. In the summer, it stretches further so you can see closer to the core of the galaxy. It's also the best time to do a time lapse so you're not freezing your butt off sitting outside for 3 hours in the middle of winter. But to figure out where it is exactly, I use a free app called Stellarium, and it lets you adjust the time and see the night sky change in the app, so that way you can focus in exactly where the path is going to be. When I took this time lapse a month ago, the prime time for me was from midnight to 3 a.m. And so that's what I recorded. Anything past 4 a.m., you're going to start seeing the sun rise. Well, it's not going to be rising, but it's going to be turning the sky blue, and it's going to change your time lapse from pure black to blue at the end. And some people might like that. I didn't really care for it, so I stopped my time lapse at 3. But let's jump out to the lake and I'll show you how I figured those settings out. So I want to get the Milky Way tonight, and that comes up in the south. So I'm going to point to the south, and everything's going to come up from the east to west. And so my path that I'm going to want to take is going to kind of want to be in this east to west arc. And that will give this the cool effect that you're following the stars and the Earth is moving around underneath it. So I'm going to use a free app called Stellarium to help me figure out where the Milky Way is going to come up. So let me come behind the camera here. So the camera's facing south. Oh, so many bugs. So hopefully you can see that. So that's south. And we can actually adjust the time here. So I want to come and speed up time. Oh, I gotta get rid of this headlamp. Speed up time, so there's midnight. And you can see there is the Milky Way starting to come up. And it's going to reach its peak around 2 a.m. Maybe 3. So anyway, you can see that right there, due south at 3 a.m. is going to be perfectly over that. So I figured out where the Milky Way is going to be, so now we can finally come and turn on the gimbal. I'm going to pretend that this is south. So we need to unlock it. And we can turn on the camera. Now, a peculiarity about the X-T3 is whatever settings I have set here are locked in when I turn on the gimbal. It doesn't let you tweak things after the fact. But I already have my exposure settings dialed in, so I don't need to adjust it anyway. So this is up and going. I am going to use the gimbal to control the shutter on the camera, which is what this USB cable does. I'm not going to control how long the shutter's open. It doesn't have that functionality. I'm just going to tell it when to fire. So it's going to say fire, and it's going to go for 15 seconds. And then it's going to say fire again, 15 seconds, fire again, 15, or whatever your exposure is set to. So next I need to come and open up the app, the Ronin-SC app. And If you need help balancing your gimbal, I created a video about that last week, and I will have that linked in the description down below as well. So this is all set up, ready to go. So I'm going to come and click on Create, and I want to do the time lapse there. And the first thing we're going to do is click on the crosshairs in the bottom right corner. That's going to give us a virtual joystick, and I can move my gimbal around using just that. And so I'm going to recreate the path that I took on location here for you. So you want to get your first spot where the Milky Way is going to first be coming up. You're going to follow the Milky Way's path across the sky from east to west. It's going to rotate around the South Pole, this southern line. And you also want to make sure that you always have horizon in your shot. I did one of these where I used a longer focal length trying to get more details, and I lost track of the horizon, and then there's no point to doing a motion time lapse because you have no point of reference. So if you're just looking at stars, you might as well just stick your camera on a tripod and do a normal time lapse and let the stars go across the sky all by themselves. So set it up so you always have horizon in your shot. And with this nice 16mm lens, that's pretty easy because it's a wide field of view. But so I had it's somewhere around there. So now I'm going to click this blue plus button, and that's going to create spot number 1. And then the Milky Way is going to continue to rise up a little bit. So I came up here kind of like right there. So we'll click that plus button again. So it's going to move in that path. And then it was still going to be pretty high by 3 a.m. And I didn't want to be following down again. I wanted to kind of continue with the core, which was still up. So I just went almost due east. So one more plus. So that's the path that I took. And if you need to come back and edit something, you can just click on one of the numbers, like 2. I came back here, and if I need to tweak that just a bit, I can. But one thing I always forget then is you need to tap that number again so it's not white, so that way you can continue moving on. Otherwise, you try to set another waypoint and you're dragging that one with you. But I only used 3 waypoints. You don't need to go very far because this is a wide angle lens. You just need to follow the speed of the stars, and they don't rotate that fast. So now we can close the virtual joystick. And now let's go over the other settings here. The interval is how long it's going to wait before it moves. So it's going to be slowly moving between spots 1, 2, and 3 in tiny increments. And it's going to move whatever interval is set at. And so I have my shutter set at 15 seconds. So you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time for the shutter to fire, and then for the gimbal to move, and for it to stop wiggling from that movement before it takes the next shot. And so 18 seconds is going to give me a 3-second buffer. So the gimbal's going to tell the shutter to fire. It's going to fire for 15 seconds from the camera settings, and then it's going to move, and it's going to wait those 3 seconds or however much time is left after moving, and then it's going to tell it to fire again for 15 seconds, move in the course of 3 seconds, rinse and repeat over the course of the whole time lapse. Now I won't go much shorter than 2 seconds beyond your exposure because sometimes it doesn't quite fire right away and you need that little bit of buffer to give the camera time to process before it fires again. But you don't want to go terribly too much longer because you're not going to get as many pictures in. So I just picked 3 seconds difference. Now you need to decide how long you're going to let the time lapse go. The longer you go, the longer your final shot is going to be. I was able to go for about 3 hours, so that's what this duration is here. I can't quite get on 3 hours, but 2 hours and 58 minutes is pretty close. And if we look down at the bottom, we can see what that's going to do for us. At the bottom, you see something called frame rate, and I have it set to 24 frames per second. Changing this frame rate does absolutely nothing in the app. The only thing it does is give you an estimate of how long your final clip is going to be when you process it. So if you were to process the shots at 24 frames per second, it's going to give us that amount of time. If you do 30, you're going to get a shorter clip because you're using up more of those frames just to make up 1 second. So at the bottom, we can see that if I'm doing a 2 hour and 58 minute time lapse at 18 seconds between shots, I'm going to get 593 photos. And if I process those at 24 frames per second, my final clip is going to be 24 seconds long, which is a pretty good long time lapse. But you can see here, if I jump it to 30 frames per second, my final clip is going to be 19 seconds. So I'm losing 5 whole seconds just by speeding it up. Now you may want to do that. It's going to give you a slightly smoother motion, and you can decide all of that when you're actually processing the video in the end. You don't have to decide it now. This just helps you understand how long your final clip is going to be. So just for fun, I'm going to change it back to 24. And that's it. We have our duration, we have our interval, we're ready to go. So before we click go, I want to talk about how we're going to power this, because 3 hours is a long time for a camera to keep running. And I actually ran out of battery on location. The gimbal, in this case, has the ability to charge my camera, which is great because there's no way it can make it for 3 hours. But the gimbal, that's a lot of juice for the gimbal to be pumping out too. So you can actually plug in a USB battery bank into the front of this gimbal here. So you can go from battery to gimbal to here. But at least for this Fuji X-T3, despite the fact that I'm charging it, it's not going to be charging it as fast as it's depleting. And so I actually only made it 2 hours and 45 minutes because my camera wasn't fully charged when I started, and I was using a third-party battery. So despite battery this charging, I still ran out of juice. So make sure your camera is fully charged before you start, and then try to come into your settings and reduce the battery usage as much as possible. So that means turning off things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and lowering your screen brightness. That way it's not going to be using as much power, and hopefully you can make it for that 3 to 4 hour time lapse. So now we're ready to go. So we can just click the shutter button at the bottom. It's going to move back to spot 1, and hopefully, yep. Well, I don't have it on 15 seconds right now because it's too bright here, but it's going to be 15 seconds. You're not going to see it move because it's so imperceptibly small, but it's going to wait 18 seconds, and here in just a second it should take the next shot. Yep, that's going to go. And the nice thing is you can actually come and close out of the app. You don't have to have the app constantly running. And anytime you come back into the app and reconnect, even if it loses connection and you reconnect, this is going to keep running. You don't have to have your phone constantly connected. And it'll also give you, down here on the bottom, the shooting percentage. It'll give you an update of what the percentage of the path from 1 to 3 is. So let's jump out to the lake one more time, and you can see what I was just talking about in action. And I still have, 2 or 3 hours before the Milky Way comes up. So I can actually just come and power down the gimbal and power down the camera. It's going to save all of our settings. So when it's time to start, all we have to do is come back into time-lapse. This notice won't be here because we'll have it turned on, and we'll just come down and hit the start button. Okay, so now we just go back to spot 1. Gimbal's there. And we're going to hit start. And just that for 593 more shots. So in 3 seconds, yep. Cool. Gimbal is still doing its thing, but we can actually come in here and see where it's at right now. So we're almost to number 2. And we've shot 43% of our time lapse. So now that our hypothetical time lapse is done, we can jump over to the computer and start processing those 500 or so pictures into the final time lapse. Well, that's going to do it for this first half of the tutorial. Tomorrow I will have the video out for the second half, showing you how to edit these photos into the final time lapse. If you appreciated the information in it, please consider giving it a thumbs up down below. It helps other people find it when they're looking for this type of thing. And then while you're at it, if you really appreciated this video and want to help support the channel, because I don't make very much money off of it at all, you can contribute directly to me by buying me a cup of coffee. I have a link in the description below on a secure website where you can buy me a cup of coffee if you liked what I showed you. And if you want to keep seeing more content creator focused videos, subscribe to my channel. Every week I'll be putting out something focused directly on content creation, as well as some random videos scattered here and there in between. But until next time, I'm doing what I love, keep doing what you love. Thanks for watching.